It's early spring, you're sitting at your dining table surrounded by receipts, tax documents, and coffee cups, staring at your pay statements realizing something painful. The government just carved out a huge chunk of everything you earned. You stayed late at work, missed birthdays, sacrificed weekends, put up with stress for an entire year, only to realize that nearly 4 or maybe even 5 months of your effort basically went toward paying taxes. And your reaction is probably the same as millions of people. Frustration, annoyance, acceptance. Because most of us grew up hearing the exact same thing. Taxes are simply part of living in society. But then you scroll through your phone. You see headlines about billionaires paying lower effective tax rates than teachers, engineers, nurses, and office workers. You see startup founders, investors, and property moguls buying private jets while showing barely any taxable income. And suddenly the question hits you. How is this even possible? It feels unfair. It feels manipulated. And here's the uncomfortable part. The game is tilted. But probably not in the way you think. It's not because wealthy people are secretly ignoring laws. It's because they're operating with an entirely different financial playbook than the one most people were taught. Most workers are taught one formula. Get a good job. Earn a bigger paycheck. Save what remains. Repeat for 40 years. But the wealthy understand something different. Labor income is usually the most aggressively taxed money you can make. Trying to become wealthy purely through salary is like running uphill while carrying a suitcase full of bricks. Today, we're breaking down one of the most talked about wealth strategies used by ultra-rich families. Buy, borrow, die. By the end of this video, you'll understand why earning more money doesn't automatically make you wealthier, why taxes quietly destroy compounding, and how regular people can apply pieces of this framework without having 9 figures in the bank. We're going to break down all 3 stages and show how wealthy families transform taxes from an obstacle into a tool. First, we need to understand one huge difference. How average people earn money versus how wealthy people earn money. When you work a regular job, your paycheck gets attacked before you even see it. Federal taxes, state taxes, payroll deductions, retirement deductions, healthcare. What lands in your account is what survives. You then use what remains to pay bills, buy groceries, and hopefully invest something. This is what many investors call the paycheck trap. You exchange hours for dollars. Then those dollars get taxed at some of the highest rates available. Wealthy individuals rarely build fortunes this way. They swap labor for ownership. Which leads us to phase 1. Buy. The wealthy don't obsess over income. They obsess over assets. Instead of focusing on monthly earnings, they focus on growing net worth. So what do they buy? Businesses, stocks, real estate, private investments. Anything that can rise in value over time. Here's the critical distinction. When an asset increases in value, taxes generally don't happen immediately. Let's say you purchase shares worth $120. A few years later they're worth $1,250. On paper you gained over $1,100. But unless you sell, that gain largely stays untouched. This is called unrealized appreciation. And it's one of the biggest advantages in wealth building. That money keeps compounding, keeps growing, keeps snowballing, without constantly getting interrupted by taxes. This is why you'll hear stories about billionaires adding $12 or $15 billion to their wealth in a year while reporting surprisingly little taxable income. Because their wealth exists inside assets, not sitting as cash inside checking accounts. The wealthy understand something simple. Selling creates taxes. So they avoid selling whenever possible. They keep building the snowball. Which raises an obvious question. If all their wealth is trapped inside investments, how do they actually live? How do they buy houses, cars, vacations, groceries? How do they turn paper wealth into real-world spending? That's where phase 2 begins. Borrow. And this is where most people's brains short-circuit. Because many of us grew up hearing one message. Debt is dangerous. Debt is failure. Debt equals stress. But wealthy investors often treat debt differently. For them, debt is frequently a financial tool. Instead of selling investments and creating taxable events, they borrow against what they already own. Imagine someone with a $12 million portfolio. Rather than selling stock and triggering taxes, they approach a lender. The lender says, "You own valuable assets. We'll lend against them." Now they suddenly have millions available in cash. Here's the important part. Loan proceeds generally are not treated the same way as earned income. meaning the cash itself doesn't automatically create income taxes. That means spending power arrives without selling assets, without interrupting compounding, without creating huge capital gains bills. And on paper, their taxable income may still appear surprisingly low. At this point you're probably wondering, okay, but borrowing isn't free. Correct. Interest exists. But here's where math matters. Suppose borrowing costs around 4 or 5%. Meanwhile their investments continue compounding around 8, 9, or 11%. Their assets may grow faster than borrowing costs. That spread becomes powerful. Their investments continue working. Their ownership remains intact, and taxes stay delayed. Compare that with the average worker. Earn money, lose 30% or more to taxes. Spend expenses. Invest leftovers. The wealthy often flip the sequence entirely. Assets first, taxes later. Sometimes much later. And that brings us to the final phase. Die. Yeah, morbid name, but extremely important concept. Because estate planning is where this framework becomes incredibly powerful. You might ask, what happens to all those loans eventually? Doesn't somebody have to pay? The answer is both yes and no. When wealthy investors pass assets to heirs, tax rules in many situations reset the cost basis. Let's simplify. Suppose your grandfather bought shares decades ago at $15 each. Today those shares trade for $650. If he sold before passing away, taxes could apply on hundreds of dollars of appreciation. But if heirs inherit those investments, the cost basis may reset closer to current market value. That means decades of accumulated gains may receive dramatically different tax treatment. This concept changes everything. Because heirs can potentially sell portions of inherited assets, settle debts, maintain ownership, and continue building wealth, which completes the cycle. Buy assets. Borrow against them. Pass them down efficiently. Repeat. That's why some families preserve wealth for generations. Not because they discovered magic. Because they understand systems. And systems compound. So now you understand the framework. Buy. Borrow. Pass assets forward. But understanding the machine is different from knowing how to use it. Because at this point, a lot of people think, cool strategy for billionaires. But I'm not borrowing millions against stock portfolios. Fair. Most people won't. At least not yet. But here's what matters. Wealth isn't created when you become rich. Wealth is created when you start behaving like an owner before you become rich. And this is where most people accidentally sabotage themselves. They optimize for income, not ownership. Look at the average financial journey. Get a raise. Upgrade the apartment. Upgrade the car. Increase spending. Repeat. Every income increase creates lifestyle inflation. Meanwhile, wealthy families often do something different. They convert extra income into assets as quickly as possible. Because assets create leverage. Lifestyle expenses create dependence. This brings us to a dangerous misconception. Most people think being debt-free automatically means financial freedom. Not necessarily. Imagine two people. Ryan owns a house worth $450,000 completely debt-free. He has almost no investments. Very little cash flow. And most of his wealth is trapped. Now imagine Emma. She still has a mortgage. But she owns rental properties, index funds, and business equity generating income every month. Who actually has more financial flexibility? Probably Emma. Because liquidity matters. Cash flow matters. Asset ownership matters. A paid-off asset can still leave you cash poor. And this is where opportunity cost quietly destroys wealth. Every dollar has a job. When you aggressively throw money toward ultra-cheap debt, you have to ask, what could that dollar have earned elsewhere? Suppose someone pays off a 3.5% loan early. Sounds responsible. But what if diversified investments historically return substantially more over long periods? That difference compounds. And compounding differences become massive. This is why wealthy investors constantly ask one question. What is my money not doing right now? Average savers ask, how quickly can I eliminate debt? Different questions. Different outcomes. Let's talk about houses. Because this is where emotions usually overpower math. For many families, their home becomes their entire financial plan. Buy house. Pay mortgage. Wait 30 years. Hope everything works out. But wealthy investors often treat property differently. They ask, Can this asset create additional opportunities? As property values rise, some people access equity strategically. Not to buy luxury cars. Not for vacations. But to purchase cash-flowing assets. Additional property. Business investments. Income-producing opportunities. The wealthy repeatedly recycle assets. Most workers simply store wealth inside them. That distinction changes outcomes. Now here's the psychological hurdle. Debt scares people. And sometimes it should. Because bad debt is destructive. Financing depreciating assets. Consumer spending. Impulse purchases. Expensive status symbols. Those things quietly drain wealth. Good debt works differently. Good debt ideally purchases things that either increase in value, generate cash flow, or create future earning power. The wealthy usually avoid large consumer liabilities. But they often carry enormous investment liabilities. Why? Because leverage amplifies ownership. And ownership creates scale. But there's another hidden force working behind all of this. Inflation. Inflation punishes savers. Think about what happens when money sits idle. Year after year purchasing power shrinks. Your cash balance stays the same. But what it buys decreases. Asset owners often experience the opposite. As prices rise, assets frequently rise too. Real estate, businesses, equities. Meanwhile, debts become easier to repay with future dollars worth less. This is why inflation feels completely different depending on which side of assets you sit on. Savers feel squeezed. Owners often adapt better. This creates what I call the ownership gap. Workers sell time. Owners accumulate systems. Workers chase raises. Owners chase assets. Workers focus on surviving inflation. Owners position themselves around it. And before you think this requires millions, it doesn't. The first version of this strategy is incredibly boring. Buy your first index fund. Build your first brokerage account. Create your first income-producing asset. Learn how taxes work. Learn how debt works. Learn how compounding works. Because financial freedom rarely arrives from one giant move. It usually arrives from hundreds of small ownership decisions repeated for years. And eventually something interesting happens. Your assets start covering expenses. Your investments create options. Your money starts producing more money than your labor. That's the crossover point. And once you hit it, you stop depending entirely on paychecks. You start depending on ownership. That's when the game begins changing. So far we've talked about how wealthy families structure money differently. Now comes the harder question. How does someone earning a normal income actually apply this without blowing themselves up financially? Because this strategy sounds amazing until someone hears the word leverage and immediately goes and does something reckless. That's where people get destroyed. The wealthy don't just use leverage. They manage leverage. Huge difference. Let's start with something simple. Liquidity. Most people accidentally create a liquidity problem. They dump every extra dollar into places that are difficult to access. Home equity. Retirement accounts. Long loan payoffs. Then life happens. Medical bills. Job loss. Unexpected expenses. And suddenly they're forced into high-interest debt because their money is locked away. Wealthy investors think differently. They value optionality. Having access to money is almost as important as having money. That's why many investors build taxable investment accounts alongside retirement accounts. Retirement accounts are powerful. Tax advantages are great, but flexibility matters too. If every dollar you own is trapped behind rules, penalties, and age restrictions, your financial system becomes rigid. A brokerage account creates flexibility. You can access capital, rebalance investments, use assets strategically, build liquidity while still staying invested. And this brings us to something almost nobody talks about. Tax drag. Tiny percentages quietly destroy massive amounts of wealth. Imagine two investors. One loses chunks of growth constantly to taxes and unnecessary selling. The other keeps more money invested and compounding. Fast forward 30 years. The gap becomes enormous. Compounding doesn't just reward returns. It rewards efficiency. The less friction your money experiences, the faster wealth compounds. This is why wealthy families obsess over keeping capital invested. Every dollar removed from compounding has a future cost. Now let's discuss borrowing against investments. Because this is where people either become smarter or become financial horror stories. Some investors borrow against portfolios. Others use securities-backed lending. Some access home equity. Some use business assets. But here's the important rule. Never build a system where one bad month destroys everything. Leverage magnifies outcomes, good and bad. If markets fall 25% and your entire strategy collapses, you weren't investing. You were gambling. Risk management is what separates wealthy operators from overconfident beginners. That means maintain emergency reserves. Avoid excessive debt loads. Diversify income streams. Stress test your finances. Ask yourself, what happens if things go wrong? Because eventually, something always goes wrong. Market crashes happen. Layoffs happen. Interest rates change. Asset prices drop. The wealthy survive because survival itself is part of the strategy. Another huge mistake people make, confusing assets with liabilities. A luxury SUV payment isn't an asset. Expensive subscriptions aren't assets. Designer purchases financed on credit definitely aren't assets. If money leaves your pocket every month without creating value, question it. Your financial system should slowly produce more cash flow every year, not require more maintenance every year. Now let's talk identity. Because wealth building eventually becomes psychological. Workers often ask, how do I earn more? Capital allocators ask, where should my next dollar go? Workers focus on income. Capital allocators focus on systems. Workers fear taxes. Capital allocators learn incentives. That mindset shift changes everything. And before you think this requires being a financial genius, it doesn't. It requires repetition. Buying assets repeatedly. Avoiding lifestyle creep repeatedly. Staying invested repeatedly. Making boring decisions repeatedly. Eventually a strange thing happens. Your investments begin producing meaningful growth. Your income becomes less important. Your asset base starts carrying more weight than your paycheck. That's when financial gravity changes. Because true wealth isn't having expensive things. True wealth is having enough ownership that your lifestyle stops depending entirely on selling your time. And that's the goal. Not luxury. Not status. Ownership. Because ownership changes the rules of the game. At this point, you might be thinking, okay, I understand the system. But building enough assets for this to matter feels impossible. That's normal. Because people dramatically overestimate what can happen in 1 year. And massively underestimate what can happen in 15. The hardest stage of wealth building isn't investing. It's surviving long enough for compounding to matter. Most people quit too early. They buy assets for 6 months. Maybe a year. Then life gets expensive. Progress feels slow. And they return to chasing shortcuts. But wealth creation rarely looks exciting while it's happening. Think about the early phase. Your first $5,000 invested feels meaningless. Your first dividend payment feels tiny. Your first investment account barely moves. That's where most people stop. Because humans are wired for immediate rewards. Compounding rewards patience instead. The goal early on is not freedom. The goal is momentum. Then eventually you reach a strange milestone. Your assets start doing small pieces of work for you. A portfolio grows while you sleep. A rental property creates cash flow. Business income arrives without extra hours. Dividend payments show up. Growth starts stacking. And then one day you notice something important. Your money contributed more this year than you did. That moment changes everything. Because now you're no longer relying exclusively on labor. You're partnering with capital. This is what I call the crossover point. The point where ownership begins carrying more weight than effort. And reaching that point requires something most people avoid. Patience. You probably won't borrow against a giant portfolio next year. You probably won't have enough assets immediately. That's okay. Because the strategy always starts the same way. Acquire. Accumulate. Protect. Repeat. And there's something important we need to clarify. Never sell doesn't literally mean never selling anything. It means avoiding unnecessary selling. Avoiding emotional decisions. Avoiding constant taxable events. Avoiding destroying compounding for short-term gratification. Because every time you interrupt compounding, you reset momentum. This entire framework is really about one thing. Efficiency. Keeping more capital working. Keeping taxes lower where legally possible. Keeping assets productive. Keeping optionality alive. And yes, there are risks. Debt can hurt you. Markets can fall. Bad investments exist. That's why wealthy families don't only focus on growth, they focus on durability. A fortune that survives decades beats one that explodes for 12 months. Which brings us back to where we started. Taxes. Most workers spend their entire lives trying to earn more money. But the game often changes when you focus on owning more assets instead. Workers sell time. Owners accumulate systems. Workers ask for raises. Owners build balance sheets. Workers chase income. Owners chase cash flow. The system may not be perfectly fair, but understanding incentives matters more than complaining about them. The tax code rewards certain behaviors. Ownership. Investment. Business creation. Asset accumulation. You don't have to love the rules, but learning them changes outcomes. So start small. Open the investment account. Buy the first index fund. Learn valuation. Study taxes. Understand debt. Build assets slowly. Because financial freedom usually doesn't arrive through one giant decision. It arrives through thousands of small decisions repeated consistently. 10 years from now, your future self will not care about the car you almost financed. Or the gadgets you almost bought. Your future self will care about ownership. Because ownership creates options. Ownership creates leverage. Ownership creates freedom. Stop measuring wealth by income alone. Start measuring it by what you own. Build assets. Protect assets. Use assets intelligently. And eventually, your money stops working for other people. And finally starts working for you.